Here's one thing that we know for sure. You know, gas canisters like this cannot be the main mode of communication of police and this community. So let's bring in Lib St, columnist at the St. Louis American, and retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore. You'll remember his leadership in the U.S. Army after Hurricane Katrina made him very well known around the country. Thanks to both of you for being with us this morning. Liz, what will make this community stop taking to the streets and start trusting that there is something better ahead?
When they're given some information, when they're given a response, when they're given something to believe that things are going to change. There's nothing that this community has experienced in these last couple of days, over these last 100 days, over these last 100 years, that law enforcement is going to change and treat African American people as human beings and look into the faces of African American people and act lawfully. There's been no message, there have been no words from any institution, any law enforcement institution, that things have changed. So why would the onus be upon African American people to change when there's been no change offered to them?
So what I'm hearing you saying is that what happened with Michael Brown is an example of a culture of policing that they don't believe will change, and that was somewhat cemented by the outcome of this legal system, although there's somewhat separate issues. So how do they get that comfort? What kind of concrete things do you think will make a difference? Culture is a hard thing to change.
It's a very hard thing to change, and we are still, the words of no indictment are still floating in the air, Chris. I mean, it's 48 hours after the African American community, that America was told that it doesn't matter what the evidence is. It doesn't matter what the witnesses say. It doesn't matter. This police officer is not even going to be taken to a trial in public to find out what happened. And so how on earth can you get to healing? How on earth can you get to trust when the words of no indictment are still floating in the air?
Right, but you can't say no indictment and that there'll never be any testing of what happened here, because that's what no indictment means, Liz. I mean, obviously, many here, including yourself, don't like it, but it went to a grand jury, it met for a long time, a prosecutor dumped all this evidence on them, maybe too much, and they came to a conclusion.
Chris, it's not evidence that we have seen. What we've experienced is a grand jury that was manhandled by the prosecutor, Prosecutor Bob McCullough. We had a grand jury that was handled in a way that no other grand jury in the history of this jurisdiction has ever been handled. We have a prosecutor that has given us some information that doesn't lead to a belief that things were done fairly. Let me give you an example. You have a police officer going into a grand jury, and the issue of credibility is always, if you're really trying to get to something, you try to find out about the credibility. When a police officer walks into a grand jury room, he's not vetted. It's an automatic understanding that he is telling the truth. I mean, when I have voir dire witnesses, when I have voir dire jurors, what I try to get to is whether or not they are going to believe a police officer over another person. Well, walking into a grand jury, the grand jurors are going to believe him. And when you read the transcript from what he said, no one challenged any of the absurd, illogical things that he said. So the people understand that.